There are usually two types of shadows. One, which is the shadows created by the direct light, which could be the sun or a lamp inside the building, and a shadow, which is the contact shadow that is created by the lighting coming from the entire sky dome. And the direct shadow is something like this one you can see here, the one from the trees. And the contact shadow is normally almost invisible, but it's basically under an object, and it's pretty simple to paint because it's just like a very soft, round, dark shape. And even if you don't see it, it's a good habit to do it, to paint it anyway. And you will see that the contact shadow sometimes is kind of more important than the direct shadow because it gives you also the feeling that an object is attached to the ground and is not like flying away. Now, in this case, the contact shadow of this bush probably is not going to be that visible because we have, grass in front of it. And also the bush itself will cover the contact shadow. But we're going to do this anyway. And, we will get what we get, and we will see in the future. But anyway, it's, a very, very simple shadow to paint. So my advice is do it anyway, and we will see. Now, there's a couple of differences in direct shadows and contact shadows, but anyway, what you need to know is the basic shape of your object, okay? And you need to know the basic shape of your object because you need to know the thickness of the object at ground level. This is the starting point, okay? So if I have this simplified version of my bush, I know that the thickness of the bush is something like this, okay, at the ground. So I care about this distance here. Because I'm telling you this because the main error that people normally do, is to have a shadow which is not starting from the shape itself, but maybe, is just thinner or larger, and it doesn't make any sense. Okay, the thickness of the shadow has to be equal to the thickness of the object where it touched the ground, and that's a starting point. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to start with one of the two. We can start with the contact shadow or the direct shadow. I don't care. Normally, what I do is I start with the contact shadow because it's easier to paint. Okay, so all we need to do here is to have a new layer, and we are going to do this layer at the bottom. Okay, and if the layer ends up out of the bush group, just push it in. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a color which is close to the color, of the shadows here. Okay, something like very dark and probably greenish. Okay, don't go black. Okay, if you are in an environment like this, it's better if you go with a dark green. Is going darker anyway because we are going to put this in multiply, but it's a lot better to have a dark green. Okay, and then we take a brush and we work with just a regular brush here, general brushes, very soft, and then we can just go up with the size of it. And then I go with opacity 100%, flow 100%, and I just click once with the mouse, you see, to get something like this. And then if you want, you can turn this into a smart object, okay? Because we are going to scale this in different ways and try different times to see what it fits better for us. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm just pushing down, see this anchor point, because I want this shadow to be thick as the bush. And so I'm, placing this under the bush, and I immediately change the blending mode to multiply. And as you can see, it gets darker, of course, because when you multiply the brightness, this is the result if you have something dark. And as you can see now, if I move with the arrow keys the shadow up and down, you immediately get the idea that this bush is moving, actually. Okay, so I don't know, there's something here, some kind of trunk, and so this bush is now floating up in the air because maybe there's something below it. Or if I move the shadow down, actually, it looks like is digging into the ground a lot more. Okay, so the contact shadow is also important to place the object at a certain height. Okay, and that's really cool because it's just a single layer, and you can move it as you want. Okay, so I'm pushing this layer like this, and of course, if you feel like you need more of this, you can Control J, and you see you will increase the strength of this shadow, and you can go down with opacity until you find the result you like. Okay, and then if you want to move them, you can select them both and move them up and down until you are happy. Okay, so this is one thing, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There's no really a lot of work to do. And then we have the direct shadow, and this is a little bit more difficult to produce, but anyway easy, let's say, and overall difficulties, I would say. So I click on the thumbnail of the layer with the content, in this case the bush, press it with Control. So I basically select, see, the shape of the bush, and this works in any case. Like, I don't know, if you have a person, if you have another type of object, it works if you have only that object and then nothing all around. Okay, so be sure that you have the cutout object on the level, on the layer you are going to select with the Control. And now that we have the shape on a new empty layer at the bottom, I fill this area with the same dark green color. Okay, and so I have this like full green border of the bush underneath it. And what I need to do here is, again, a smart object, because we are going to squeeze this, we are going to scale it down, and we don't want to lose any information. So now that I have a smart object, I press Ctrl T to get the anchors, and I rotate it in anti-clockwise because the light comes from the right, and I squeeze it, and I just I basically push it down until I get the same thickness. Remember the example with the yellow lines? So this is around the thickness of this bush on the ground, and then I can push it further on the left because the sun is coming from the right. Now, if you know the height, of the sun, okay, you can also trace the length of your shadow, because you can basically pinpoint the sun and then point on the top part of this bush, and probably this shadow will be so long. Look at the shadows here we have from the trees. They are very long, so even this one is probably getting out of the screen. So I'm going back here on the direct shadow, and I'm pushing this a lot further. Okay, like this. And of course, you can right click on the anchors and then click the store, and just move it down a little bit, because the direction of the sun is something like this, and that's okay. And now the thing is, if you put this in multiply, you see this is not good, because the brightness or the darkness, I would say, of the shadow will be added to the photo underneath. And so sometimes what I found myself to do is to choose darken instead, okay, or darker color. But now you see, this is basically is just green, but darker stuff on the top will be over it, okay. And of course, as you may know, shadow will basically blur as long as they go away from the object. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, I go for filter, blur gallery, and I'm using the field blur. The field blur is amazing. It works amazingly. And sometimes, as you can see here, there's no pin. And this is a bug, and it's good that we get the bug. You should see a pin and a ring all around the pin, and there's no pin here, there's no ring here, but it's there. You see, it's basically here, it's not visible. So if it happens to you, just press cancel, save your work, and restart Photoshop. Okay, so I'm saving it, and when it's finished, I will restart Photoshop and I will continue. Now that I restarted Photoshop and I reloaded the file, as you can see, we get the pin and we get the rings. Now, what can we do here? We can move the pin, because if you move the pin, you're saying to Photoshop, I want this amount of blur in this area. So we move the pin here under the bush and we say, okay, close to the bush, we want almost no blur, okay? Something like this. And then we add another pin. As you can see, the mouse icon is basically like a pin with a plus. We click there and we get a new pin, and in this one we increase the strength of the blur, and it works amazingly. And you can add as many pins as many pins you want, and then when you are happy with the result, you can press OK. You can have a high quality mode. Now this is not necessary, but I'm going with the OK. And remember, this is a smart object, so you can go back on the blur gallery anytime you want. Okay, so now this is the effect, and I'm going down with the opacity a little bit, and as you can see, it's pretty cool what I'm getting. And of course, I can add another little bit of dark shadow here, because this is now, probably too bright. I'm solving the problem of having a shadow, that, cover this area, but we can have another, contact shadow. Maybe I can move it a little bit on the left like this. And, I can increase the strength here, but not too much. I don't want to exaggerate. Maybe this time we can zoom in a little bit and see this area a little bit better, okay? Now, I feel like that we should have this, this darker, tones, even a little bit more on the bush, because if we have a darker area, darker ground, that will bounce on the bush itself. So I'm going back on the bush and I'm going to look for, this could be the layer, the mid-gray layer in overlay. We can paint some dark values with a very soft brush and a very low opacity. As you can see, very, very low, like, I don't know, 3%, okay? Just to match a little bit better, maybe on the back. Okay. I feel like it's kind of working. Even if this area is less contrasted than this one, so I'm going back on the contrast, which was this one, and I'm going up a little bit more with the contrast, with the dark value here. So we have less contrast, let's say. Okay, cool. You can look here, and if it looks good here, then you're doing a good job, okay? The trick is to look at the image on a smaller scale, and if it feels like is matched with the overall picture, then you have done a good job. Now, I mean, we are still missing the mask, to cut out this bush in order to mix it better. So what we're going to do now, of course, is we're going to add a mask here, and we're going to paint out some, strokes in order to simulate grass over the bush. Before that, remember that you can then go on top here, because now these mask here, this the mask of the shadow itself is too blurry, I would say. So what you can do to make something more realistic, as you can see here, you see some of the grass crop. I mean, they will, this is by basically bright over a dark ground. And we should have also here, you see there is some dark ones over a bright area, and we can do the same. So if we take a dark color, like from this area here, and then a very small brush, okay, we can go close to this area, okay, and on a new layer, even in darken mode, we can just paint a few lines, you see, maybe a little bit bigger and less hard, a little bit softer. This is too big. A little bit of trial and error. Let's try 2 pixels. Let's have this option on, which is the opacity on pressure. So if I press less, I get less, strength, less visible. And then you can just take the layer and move it down, see? To get just a glimpse of it. Good. Now let's go back on the top where we have the mask of the entire bush, okay? And let's do the same, but this time here on the top. So we need to brush out some of the bush with the black value, the black color. See? To fake some grass blade going on top of it. And I'm start painting, here. So because I don't want to see any cut, any sort of, art edge. Maybe smaller. You can go like this, like one by one, or you can, even use one of the brushes we have done, and you will make a better job probably, or at least quicker. And then we can have maybe a little bit of just soft mask here, because when you have something which is far away like this bush, and it's covered by very small details. A very small details on the distance becomes like a gradient, becomes so small that you are not going to see. It's impossible to paint it with just a single line. It becomes smaller than a pixel. And so when something becomes smaller than a pixel, you are of course forced to paint with the blur, with the gradient. And as you can see, you can just unlink the mask of the bush from the content and you can move it around. So if you feel like you painted too close to the bush, you can then unlink, you click in here and then you select the mask and you can move the mask up and down until you are happy with the result. Okay, now I don't like this shape here. It's too dark, it's too visible. The bush is cut it out in a weird way there. So let me try one thing. I will go and make a copy of this, of the bush itself. So I select all the stuff, I press Ctrl Alt E to make you see a copy of it. Now this is this is really like a brute force method to fix a problem, but it's also quick. So I'm moving this a little bit here, you see, on the left, bottom left. Then I mask it, invert the mask, and I start painting with a white color. Of course, you need to go up with the opacity. We don't need pressure on opacity anymore. And maybe we can find some, we can use some brushes like the one we used for the left part here of the grass to paint some leaves shape. See? And we solve the problem. And if you don't like the content, just unlink the content from the mask and move the content around until you find an area that you like. Okay, I like this one. Oh, very cool. Now I like it. Okay, so this is what you need to do. And the next stuff we are going to do is reflection. But in order to make reflections, we need to have actually something which reflects this bush. And so we're making a copy of this bush here, and we're going to paste it here to have some reflection on the swimming pool on the floor.